You know, when you break an arm, the diagnostic process is, like, incredibly clean.
Oh, yeah, completely a binary.
Right. It's either broken or it's not broken. The X-ray shows this jagged white line right on the screen. The doctor points to it, and you immediately know exactly what to do next.
Yeah, you put a cast on it.
Exactly.
Right.
But when you step out of the clinic and into your emotional life, well, that X-ray machine becomes completely useless.
Oh, totally useless.
You're suddenly navigating this landscape that is just messy, complex, and honestly deeply confusing. So welcome to the Living Hopecast. We are jumping into a remarkably honest message today.
We really are.
It's called Becoming People Our Children Want to Call, and this was presented by Jeremy and Anna Payton.
Yeah, on Sunday, May 10th at Living Hope Community Church.
Right, and before we get too deep into the weeds here, I just want to mention that you can actually watch the full video recording of this message. We've linked it in our description, and it's also available on the Living Hope webpage, YouTube, Facebook, and the church app.
And it is definitely a message that requires a willingness to look closely at our own relational habits. It's pretty challenging.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today for this deep dive is to figure out the practical steps of becoming the kind of person others actually feel safe reaching out to.
Yeah, the people you want to call when things get hard.
Exactly. We're going to explore how to avoid accidentally becoming someone's, like, uninvited accountability partner.
The worst.
Right. And we're going to learn how to master the absolute simplest, most foundational form of Christian community, which they call the Church of Two.
Yeah, and this whole concept actually started with a moment of subtle internal panic for Jeremy.
Oh, yeah.
That's the catalyst of everything that follows in this message. Jeremy was wrestling with this really heavy personal issue, and he needed perspective.
Right. He needed advice.
So his first instinct was to reach out to several men he deeply respected. I mean, these were men known for their biblical knowledge and their spiritual maturity.
The heavy hitters in his life.
Exactly. But as he went to make contact, he just froze.
Wow.
He realized he was actually terrified to call his own mentors.
That is just such a jarring realization. I mean, to know someone has the exact wisdom you need, but to be actively afraid to ask them for it.
Yeah, it really gave him pause. So he sat with that fear and managed to pin down 3 very specific reasons why he didn't want to make the call.
And that first one is so universally relatable.
Oh, completely.
He was terrified they just wouldn't stop talking.
Yes.
He imagined coming to them with a specific immediate ache, only to end up trapped in this long, totally unrelated lesson about whatever theological concept just happened to be on their mind that day.
And we can look at the psychology behind that dread, right? Because when you are in pain, your primary need is simply to be seen.
Just acknowledged.
Right. You need someone to witness your reality. So when a mentor immediately pivots to a lecture, they are subtly invalidating your present pain in favor of their own knowledge.
Wow, yeah.
It just leaves the person seeking help feeling entirely invisible.
It's like going to the doctor because you have a painful splinter under your fingernail.
Oh, ouch.
Right, and you just want someone to pull it out and acknowledge that it hurts. But instead, the doctor traps you in this 45-minute lecture about your overall dietary habits and, your lifestyle choices.
Right.
The information might be factually correct, sure, but you just wanted a friend in that moment, not a sermon.
Exactly. And that lack of attunement leads directly to his second fear, which involves the sheer weight of spiritual authority.
Oh, this one is heavy.
It really is. Jeremy feared receiving advice that he didn't have permission to ignore.
Wow. Permission to ignore.
Yeah, because when you intertwine relational capital with spiritual leadership, it creates a very precarious dynamic. Like if a mentor gives you direction and you choose a different path, disagreeing with them can almost feel like you're disagreeing with God himself.
That is an incredibly heavy burden to place on a simple phone call.
Right.
I mean, you just wanted to process your thoughts out loud. It immediately raises the stakes to a super unhealthy level.
It totally paralyzes the relationship. And it feeds right into the third fear, which is disappointing them.
Ah, yeah.
Jeremy knew that if he opened up about his struggle, he might accidentally turn these men into uninvited accountability partners.
Right, because now they know about it.
Exactly. They would feel a sense of ownership over his problem, so they'd be constantly checking up on his progress. He'd lose the freedom to just struggle because now he has to manage their expectations on top of his own issue.
Because unchecked spiritual authority creates that kind of fear, Jeremy basically realized he had to find a completely different model.
He did.
But what is so powerful about this message is that Jeremy doesn't spend his time critiquing these older men.
No, not at all.
He tunes the mirror entirely onto himself.
And what's fascinating here is how he projects this hesitation onto his own future. He realizes he is terrified of his own children, or, his future grandchildren, feeling that exact same hesitation when they think about calling him.
Oh, wow. He saw himself becoming the guy with the sermon.
Exactly. He realizes that if he doesn't change his trajectory right now, he will become the guy they avoid because they know they'll just get a lecture. He wants to emulate the model of Jesus instead.
Which is what?
Offering a gentle, safe presence long before any knowledge or correction is ever shared.
So, recognizing that massive gap between the kind of person he currently was and that gentle presence he actually wanted to become, that pushed Jeremy to seek out a solution.
It did.
And he discovered an organization called Luke 10 or LK10 and learned about this concept of a church of two or CO2.
Yeah, the CO2.
The fundamental premise is just that you cannot practice emotional and spiritual health in isolation.
It's impossible.
So he nervously asked his wife, Anna, to partner with him on this, openly admitting he was really afraid she might say no.
And escaping that isolation isn't just some neat psychological strategy to feel better. It represents a profound theological shift.
Okay, how so?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Jeremy and Anna's message highlights that God's design for life and growth is fundamentally rooted in pairs.
Pairs. Like 2 by 2.
Right. And this isn't just a reaction to a fallen world. If you look at Genesis chapter 2, before sin ever enters the picture, God looks at Adam and declares, "It is not good for man to be alone." Pairing up is literally the original design.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
Because if you look at modern Western Christian culture, we're constantly told that faith is a solo journey.
Right, the personal quiet time.
Exactly. The dominant phrase is having a personal relationship, which really implies this deeply individualistic private endeavor. So how do we reconcile that hyper-individualistic culture with the claim that the fundamental DNA of the kingdom is actually a two-person fellowship?
That's a great point. And that hyper-individualism is largely a product of Western cultural ideals layered over the text rather than the text itself.
Jeremy addresses this by pointing to the actual mechanics of how Jesus structured his ministry. When Jesus commissions his 12 disciples in Matthew chapter 10, he doesn't hand out 12 individual assignments.
It doesn't.
No. The text explicitly lists them in 6 distinct pairs. In the original Greek, Matthew uses the word kai, which translates to and acting as a literal linguistic handshake between the names.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's Simon and Andrew, James and John. He binds them together before sending them out. And then he repeats this exact same strategy later in Luke 10 when he sends out the 72.
So the concept of with is actually woven into the literal methodology of the early church, not just the theology.
It saturates the scripture. I mean,
Right.
Jeremy notes that the Hebrew concept of the face of God is tied to his presence over 150 times. The ultimate promise of the gospel isn't just salvation from a distance.
Right.
It is Emmanuel, God with us. The Holy Spirit indwelling or being with humanity is mentioned over 200 times in the New Testament. Presence is the entire point. So think about your own life right now, based on that metric. Do you actually have a spiritual partner?
It's a tough question.
It is. Like someone who isn't just a casual friend you text occasionally, but someone who actively watches your blind spots and who is truly with you in the trenches.
Because understanding the theology of pairs is completely useless without the daily mechanics of how to actually maintain them.
Exactly. Which brings us to exactly how Jeremy and Anna execute this church of two.
The practice they adopted is remarkably simple, which is honestly what makes it sustainable.
Yeah, if it's too complicated, you just drop it.
Exactly. They use a tool called a round one check-in. The requirement is just to meet with your partner almost every day, Monday through Friday, usually skipping the weekends to rest.
Yeah.
And the entire process only takes about 5 minutes.
Like 5 minutes, that's it.
That's it, 5 minutes. You identify your current emotion, you share it with your partner along with a brief explanation of why you feel that way.
Just a brief one.
Right, not a whole story. And then you end your turn by stating, "I'm all in."
But identifying the emotion accurately, that's where the real work happens.
Right.
The curriculum suggests an acronym called SASHIT. So that's sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender.
Yes. And getting precise with that vocabulary is a massive hurdle for most adults. Jeremy and Anna are very candid about how differently they approached this part.
Yeah, Anna was not a fan of the acronym.
Not at all. She actually despised the acronym SASHIT. She aggressively rejected the word tender, asking if it meant someone had rubbed her raw.
That is hilarious.
And she initially wanted to argue that words like tired or busy were emotions.
Which they aren't. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because Anna hated the acronym, she found a different tool.
Right.
She prefers an app called How We Feel, which uses this visual grid of colors and higher-low energy quadrants to help users pinpoint their exact emotional state.
Very visual.
Yeah. And Jeremy, on the other hand, uses a physical emotion wheel chart that he literally just keeps on their coffee table.
I love that.
Right. These tools act as emotional training wheels. You might feel totally ridiculous consulting an app or a chart just to figure out how you feel, but they force you to bypass vague complaints and identify the root emotion.
And there is hard neuroscience backing up why those training wheels are so critical.
Oh, really?
Yeah, during the message, Jeremy references Dr. Jim Wilder's concept of our relational circuits.
Relational circuits, okay.
Imagine your brain has an electrical panel specifically designed for relationships. When those circuits are turned on, your prefrontal cortex is engaged. This is the part of the brain that allows for empathy, curiosity, and seeing others as human beings.
The good stuff.
Exactly. But when we experience stress, fear, or anger, those circuits overload and pop.
It's an amygdala hijack.
Yes.
The threat detection center of your brain just takes over,
Yeah.
and the prefrontal cortex essentially goes totally dark.
Precisely. When your relational circuits are offline, you physically lose the capacity for empathy. You literally start treating the people you love most as problems to be solved or as literal threats to your peace. So the practice of using the emotion wheel or the app engages a process called affect labeling.
Affect labeling.
Right. Simply pausing to accurately identify and speak the emotion out loud dampens the amygdala and shifts blood flow back to the prefrontal cortex. Naming the feeling literally forces your relational circuits back online.
That is wild. But speaking, the emotion is really only half the check-in. The other half is how the partner responds. And there is a strict, non-negotiable golden rule here.
Oh, this is the hardest part.
Yeah. The listening partner must act as a mirror, not a mechanic. There's absolutely no fixing allowed.
None. And this is usually the hardest part for anyone trying this practice. I mean, if your partner says they are terrified about a potential layoff at work, your immediate instinct is to offer a 5-step financial contingency plan.
Right. Or to quote a Bible verse about God providing for the birds of the air.
Exactly. And we do that because sitting in the presence of someone else's anxiety makes us squirm.
Oh, big time.
Offering a fix or a verse in that moment isn't actually about comforting them. It's an anxious reflex to make ourselves comfortable.
Oof. That's a gut punch.
It is.
Yeah.
We want the negative emotion to disappear so we can stop feeling the secondhand tension.
Exactly that. By removing the pressure to solve the problem, the check-in becomes this safe harbor. You are simply offering presence, mirroring back what they said so they feel actually understood.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the concluding phrase of the check-in, which is, I'm all in.
And Jeremy admitted that saying I'm all in felt really cheesy at first.
I bet.
But it acts as an essential anchor. If you just confess something highly vulnerable, like admitting you feel intensely jealous of a friend's success, or you are totally overwhelmed by a parenting mistake, your biological instinct is the flight response.
Oh, for sure. You want to drop the emotional grenade and run away.
Right, to avoid the vulnerability hangover. But looking your partner in the eye and saying, I'm all in, overrides that flight response. It signals, here is my ugly truth, and I'm choosing not to abandon this relationship.
It builds this resilient container for the relationship. However, and I love this part, Jeremy and Anna completely shatter any illusion that implementing this process is a neat, tidy, peaceful journey.
Oh, it was a mess.
They share some intensely vulnerable realities about what actually happened when they first started practicing this daily check-in.
Yeah, they admitted that attempting this practice led to their 2 biggest fights in 15 years of marriage.
Oh.
Which, honestly, if they had claimed this practice was a magic wand that instantly cured all their marital tension, it would have sounded like a cheap sales pitch.
Exactly. But their honesty really grounds the message in reality. The conflict came down to a clash of timing and what they call sideways emotions.
Jeremy was super eager to practice the check-ins, so he would attempt to force these deep, emotionally heavy conversations right as Anna was frantically trying to get out the door for her commute.
Oh no, worst possible timing.
The worst. She felt completely harassed, viewing his demands for emotional intimacy as literally an obstacle to her day. Because she didn't have the capacity to engage, she would deflect.
Which left Jeremy feeling stonewalled and entirely rejected.
Exactly. They were constantly colliding.
Anna shared this darkly funny anecdote to illustrate the sheer tension brewing in their house during this phase.
Oh, the Legos.
Yes. She came home from work one day to find pieces of a Lego set completely smashed and scattered across the floor.
Oh, man.
And knowing they didn't have young toddlers anymore, she just looked at Jeremy and asked, "Did the Legos have a hard day?"
That is so funny, but it is a perfect tragic picture of what unprocessed emotion actually looks like. And this is where the stakes of this entire concept become crystal clear.
Yeah, this isn't just about feeling nice.
No, this practice isn't about having slightly more pleasant mornings. It is about preventing literal emotional destruction. Jeremy shared a deeply sobering story to illustrate this.
Yeah, about Anna's heart.
Right. Anna was undergoing some medical screenings for her heart, and over the course of 2 days, she was giving him updates, trying to process the medical information with him, and Jeremy completely checked out.
Just went cold.
He retreated into clinical triage mode.
And he realized days later that he wasn't ignoring her because he was indifferent. He checked out because he was absolutely terrified.
Right. His circuits blew.
His fear over her heart condition overloaded his relational circuits, and his brain just defaulted to the flight response. He shut down because he couldn't fix it.
Yes.
But because they had built the framework of the Church of Two, he was eventually able to recognize his own shutdown, go back to her, and say, "I'm so sorry I wasn't hearing you because I was scared."
And this raises an incredibly important question regarding what happens when an adult lacks the framework to process those deep primary emotions. Jeremy contrasts his own shutdown with a really tragic situation involving a close friend's father.
Oh, this story was heartbreaking.
It really was. This man's wife is in the hospital actively dying of stage 4 cancer. The husband clearly loves her and is devastated by the impending loss.
But his reaction is the complete opposite of Jeremy's quiet shutdown.
Right. It manifests as sheer rage. Psychologically, fear and grief are highly vulnerable primary emotions. When this man's relational circuits overload, his brain cannot tolerate the vulnerability.
So what does it do?
It defaults to a secondary emotion, anger. Because anger feels powerful. It acts as a protective armor against his utter powerlessness. He isn't actually angry at the hospital staff. He is desperately trying to assert control over a situation where he has none.
And the collateral damage of that secondary emotion is just devastating. I mean, he attacks the staff, he questions every medical decision, and even threatens lawsuits.
Yeah.
He creates such a massive relational mess in the hospital room that his dying wife has to spend her limited final energy apologizing to the nurses on his behalf.
That's awful.
It escalates to the point where she tells her son that because of the chaos he causes, she honestly doesn't want her husband to visit her anymore.
His inability to process his fear ends up literally isolating him from his wife during her final days. This is precisely what Jeremy meant when he said he refuses to become an angry, bitter old man who inadvertently pushes his children away.
Wow.
And Anna crystallizes this entire dynamic with a brilliant observation. She points out that when we see a child acting out on a playground, throwing a toy or pushing a friend, we intuitively know they are just feeling misunderstood, hungry, or hurt.
Right. They just don't have the words.
Exactly. They lack the vocabulary to articulate their internal state, so the emotion leaks out sideways as bad behavior. And Anna notes regarding adult, we just get taller.
We just get taller. Man, notice how that changes your perspective on the conflict in your own life.
It really does.
Think about the last time you snapped at a coworker or lashed out at your spouse over something completely trivial, like loading the dishwasher.
Right, the classic dishwasher fight.
Exactly. Were you actually furious about the plates? Or were your relational circuits fried because you were secretly anxious about a financial strain or carrying a sense of inadequacy from a totally unrelated event?
Usually the latter.
Without a deliberate practice to process our inner world, we act out our unprocessed emotions just like kids on a playground.
But the immense payoff for doing the hard work of emotional regulation is resilience. After Jeremy and Anna navigated those massive fights early in their practice, they experienced a profound shift in their marriage. The recovery time changed completely.
Yeah, instead of walking on eggshells for weeks or having this cold shadow cast over the house while they slowly built back relational equity, they recovered in a matter of hours.
Which is huge.
The very next day, they felt 10 times stronger than they did before the fight, entirely because the check-in practice gave them a safe, structured path back to connection.
They had basically built a system that allowed them to repair ruptures almost immediately.
So what does this all mean? We've tracked Jeremy's journey from realizing his fear of unwanted sermons and uninvited accountability partners to uncovering the biblical design of being paired up.
Yeah, that original design.
He and Anna move past the modern hyper-individualism of faith to reclaim the Church of Two, doing the messy, frustrating, but incredibly rewarding daily work of a 5-minute check-in. They use their emotional training wheels, they resist the deep urge to fix each other, and they intentionally keep their relational circuits humming.
It proves that the simplest form of community is often the most challenging to actually execute consistently, but it is the only way to become that gentle presence.
And Jeremy ends his message with a very specific, practical challenge for you. He says, invite someone to do a dumb, low-risk thing with you.
I love that phrasing.
Form a church of two. Try a 5-minute daily check-in with your spouse, a trusted friend, or even with your kid on the drive to school. Practice being a mirror, not a mechanic.
And as we close, I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. If our unexpressed emotions always find a way to leak out sideways, whether that looks like sudden rage at a hospital nurse or smashed Legos on the living room floor, what current frustrating behavior in your own life or in the life of someone you love is actually just a desperate, unnamed emotion waiting for a safe space to be checked in.
We'll let you sit with that one. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive on the Living Hope Cast. We'll catch you next time.